Okay, so in this next video, we're going to talk about the stages of processing food and a little bit about different types of animals and depending on whether or not they have simple or complex body plans. So this video is going to be a little bit shorter than the last one. Okay, so there are effectively 4 different stages of food processing. The first is ingestion, and that is sort of the act of eating or getting the food into your body initially. And as you can see, animals typically do that through their mouth, and we're going to be talking about the different compartments of digestion in a little bit. The second part is digestion, and this is the process of breaking the food down into smaller parts, ultimately into molecules that are small enough to absorb, for the animal body to absorb. Absorption is the uptake of the small molecules by the body cells so that the body can use it. And elimination is getting rid of the undigested material out of the digestive system. So as you can see here in this human diagram, ingestion occurs typically through the mouth. Digestion occurs in the mouth and through much of the digestive system. Other parts of the digestive system function in absorption of water and nutrients and other molecules that have been broken down through digestion, and eventually the waste has to be eliminated. So there are several different feeding mechanisms involved in the stage of ingestion. And they differ a lot among the different types of animals. So first we have filter feeders. Filter feeders typically are feeding in water, and they will sift through water for the small particles of food that they can find. And you don't really think of some filter feeders that you might be familiar with are like barnacles or clams or mussels or something like that. But filter feeding can even occur in really large animals like, for example, baleen whales. For example, the humpback is a baleen whale. And what they have is they have these they're bony structures. They're not made from bone. They're more flexible than that, but they're these structures that are pretty firm, and they are on the outside of the mouth. And what the whales do is they can essentially put a whole bunch of water in their mouth, and then they close their mouth so that the baleen is stuck between the outside of the body and the inside of the body, and then they can push the water out with their tongue or with other sorts of internal pressure devices, and then the water leaves the whale through the baleen, and all of the small food items are trapped. So it's sort of like a sieve where the water is released, but anything left behind in the baleen sieve gets eaten as food. So they catch little shrimp and stuff like that using the baleen. Substrate feeders are organisms that live on or in their food source. So they are basically feeding on the thing that they are living on. An example of that would be a caterpillar who's living on a leaf, and it's basically eating the structure underneath it. You can see this is the feces, and here's a caterpillar. This is the leaf material, and it's just feeding on the leaf material and leaving feces. And then there's also fluid feeding. Fluid feeders will they feed on liquid, and typically that they suck the liquid from whatever their host is, a living host. So this is a fly feeding on, looks like a human finger, by sucking the blood out of it. And then bulk feeders are what we would typically think of, and we would describe ourselves as bulk feeders. And bulk feeders eat relatively large pieces of food. So here's some examples of that. Here you have a big anaconda eating some kind of a deer. Here's the mouth of the anaconda. That's actually I'm not positive this anaconda is going to successfully be able to eat this deer. And then here is an awesome video of a shark eating a seal, also a bulk feeder. Let me see if we can see the beginning of that again. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so any animal that consumes large pieces of food would be considered a bulk eater. In terms of digestion, remember the first stage of processing food is ingestion, which we just talked about, the different types of feeding. And now we're going to talk about digestion. There's two different types of digestion, mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion is, and this typically takes place in terms of bulk feeders, have to do both of these. So mechanical digestion is when you take in large pieces of food and you can convert those into smaller pieces of food. And that just prepares it for the second step of digestion in this case, which will be chemical. So for animals, mechanical digestion typically takes place in the mouth, and it begins to occur. The first mechanical digestion occurs with teeth chewing the food in the mouth. The mouth is also called the oral cavity, which we'll see in a few minutes. And another place that mechanical digestion takes place is potentially in the stomach. And some animals have more mechanical digestion in their stomach than others, but the stomach is typically muscular and it can churn and grind food. Again, for some animals, there's more mechanical digestion than for others. Chemical digestion is when you have the digestion of parts of food being broken down, digestion of food using chemical substances like enzymes. So when digestive enzymes break down food into small organic molecules, that is called chemical digestion. And chemical digestion is pretty much necessary for the food to get to small enough molecules that it can be absorbed by the cells in the body. So you might be wondering, how do animals avoid digesting their own tissues? Because you've got all these digestive enzymes that are being exposed to the animal tissues. How do the animal tissues survive? Well, in most cases, any type of chemical digestion is going to be occurring in specialized digestive compartments. And these digestive compartments are adapted in a way to avoid deconstruction from the enzymes that would digest your food. So first we're going to talk about a really simple digestive compartment, the smallest type of digestive compartments. And those are found within animals that do intracellular digestion. Basically, the only types of animals, or the most common types of animals that do intracellular digestion, are sponges. And sponges are aquatic organisms. They can be either freshwater or saltwater. And we're not going to go into the full detail of how this works. But what I want you to know is that basically what the sponge does is it takes up tiny molecules of food, which are basically just particles floating around in the water that it can consume. It takes up tiny little molecules into its individual cells, these choanocytes here. So you can see that here's the inside of the sponge, and it's got all of these little cells, individualized cells, choanocytes, and some other things. There's little flagella coming out from the choanocytes, and food particles can get trapped within near those flagella, and then they can move into the body of the choanocyte. And inside the choanocyte are little vacuoles that hold the food. So here's the little vacuoles that are holding the food. You can see right here the sponge is consuming some food using phagocytosis. So I don't know if you guys know what phagocytosis is, but phagocytosis is basically the surrounding of food particles into little vacuoles. Okay, so once it's in the vacuoles can contain some enzymes that help it digest the food, and so that's the way that there's intracellular digestion in sponges. Pinocytosis is almost the same as phagocytosis, although pinocytosis is taking in water instead of food. So these are intracellular digestion. Use intracellular digestion, which is using the little vacuoles, cellular organelles, to break down the food. And that's the very smallest of the digestive compartments. But you can see that the enzymes aren't really within the tissues of the animal. They're just within those little vacuoles. Okay, so if we were to go to additional digestive compartments, we want to talk specifically about extracellular digestion. So that last example with the sponges was intracellular digestion. In extracellular digestion, you have breakdown of food in compartments, larger compartments than a vacuole, and these compartments are continuous with the outside of the animal's body. Okay, so our digestive tract actually is continuous with the outside of the animal's body, of our body. If you think about our digestive tract involving our mouth and our rectum and all of that, so there is actually openings to the outside of the body. And so extracellular digestion would be any digestion that occurs in a similar type of structure to that. So, and it's not occurring within our cells, it's within compartments. So some benefits of extracellular digestion is it allows for larger pieces of food to be ingested than what we saw with the sponge. With intracellular digestion, obviously the particles of food have to be small enough to fit within the vacuoles that are inside a cell. Extracellular digestion, you can consume larger food items. The simplest type of digestive compartment that is for extracellular digestion is called the gastrovascular cavity. Gastrovascular cavity. And it is for animals with a very simple body plan. It basically has one opening, and when it has one opening, that essentially states that the mouth and the anus are the same thing. So food comes in the same opening as waste leaves. So a really good example of something with an animal with a simple body plan and a gastrovascular cavity is a hydra. Hydras are related to like sea anemones and corals and stuff like that, and jellyfish, but hydras are sessile, which means that they are basically stuck to the ground and they don't move. They're really small, but what you have is you have a mouth, you have these tentacles which actually can sting and capture prey, and when they sting and capture prey, they force the food into the mouth and into the gastrovascular cavity, which is connected to the mouth. And here you have the prey item, which is a Daphnia. It's like a little crustacean, sort of like a little shrimp. And then once the food item is in the gastrovascular cavity, you have a bunch of enzymes that are breaking it up into smaller parts, and then those little molecules after chemical digestion can be absorbed by the cells in the side of the gastrovascular cavity of the hydra. Okay, so we don't need to know about the details of this, but just know the gastrovascular cavity has a single opening to the outside external environment, and that single opening is the mouth. So I think we're going to see a video of a hydra eating a Daphnia here. Okay, here's the hydra. Can't really see that it's attached, but it is attached to the substrate, and here's the Daphnia, which is that little crustacean. It's actually pretty big in comparison to the hydra. Here's the hydra, here's the tentacles. Whoops, you might have missed that. Let me replay it. Okay. Okay. It's kind of hard to see what's going on, but the Hydra has captured the Daphnia, and now it's shoving the Daphnia into its mouth. The mouth is right here. Here's the tentacles, and here's the body of the Daphnia. And you can see it's actually being engulfed. Here is the gastrovascular cavity of the Hydra. If the Hydra can get the Daphnia in there. Okay. And that's the end. Yep, there we go. So here's the mouth, and now it's in the gastrovascular cavity. Okay, so we're still talking about extracellular digestion. We just talked about the gastrovascular cavity, and that was for animals with a simple body plan. Extracellular digestion also happens in animals with a complex body plan, and a complex body plan includes an alimentary canal or a digestive tract. It's the same thing. Alimentary canal and digestive tract are the same thing. So this is what we have. And it is a digestive tube that is open at two ends. Okay, so again, the digestive tract is exposed to or in contact with the outside environment. And an alimentary canal has two openings that are exposed to the outside environment, the mouth and the anus. And the alimentary canal is, one of the benefits of it is that it can have stepwise digestion, because it can have specialized regions that carry out the digestion in order. Whereas the gastrovascular cavity, you just have this one place where the food has to go and the waste has to be released. If you have an alimentary canal, that's a one-way tube rather than a two-way cavity, then you can have more specialized digestion that goes along a stepwise path. So the earthworm is an example. Here's the mouth. You have the pharynx, the crop, the esophagus, the crop and the gizzard. These are kind of like a stomach. Then you have the intestine and the anus. In a grasshopper, you have a mouth and esophagus, crop, gastric caecae, which are sort of like the stomach and intestines, and then you have the rectum and the anus. And in a bird, this is going to be more like what we have, mouth, esophagus, crop, we don't have this, stomach, gizzard, we also don't have those, the intestine, and the anus. So all of these are sort of longer digestive tracts with two openings, one at the mouth and one at the anus, even though they all look kind of different from one another. So we're going to stop there, and then we'll talk about the mammalian alimentary canal or digestive tract in the next recording.